There we are. Are we there? Are we there? Are we? Yes, yes, we are. Okay. So, end of last year, I started streaming kind of just to get my feet under me because I'm a very reserved person. I'm not really someone who likes to, um, you know, put myself out there if I don't have anything to say. At the time, I thought I could do like a really kind of hectic schedule for Twitch. Um, Essentially, kind of being like, this is like the full programming. I had ideas for, I think, pretty much every day of the week. I originally was planning to live stream every day of the week. Um, and be like, yeah, like this is how I want to start um my work with the Ludicist. Um, Learned very quickly that I'm not cut out for that. Like the daily streaming kind of thing, the daily streaming kind of vibe. The thing is that I struggled with this concept of thinking that, what I was putting out there was not really helpful. It wasn't, like, I'm not a waffler, right? So I don't really like creating content versus um creating actual physical manifestations of ideas, if that makes sense. Um, I guess there's a difference between like slop and a project, right? I know that word's kind of getting thrown around now, like just eat your slop or whatever. But in any case, I very much realized that I was not okay with the way that I was um, showing up online. Not that I was embarrassing myself in any way. It was just more that I wasn't content with the concept of constantly coming on here and just talking about things that weren't directly, I don't want to say directly connected, because I was making attempts to connect what I was doing and exploring with ludic theory, but ultimately what I wanted to do really was disseminate information that is not in the public consciousness yet, right? That being ludic theory. So I kept thinking that I could fill my schedule with all these things, and then uh, work on the hominid development theory on the side, on top of everything else that I was doing just in my everyday life. That was not going to work. That was not going to work. I learned that kind of the hard way. So I was like, okay, it's fine. Let me take a break. January of this year, I decided I'm going to go full throttle into ironing out the hominid development theory. The entire outline for all 12 episodes was actually done in January, but the outlines were skeletons. And I knew that each time I would produce an episode, I would have to do research based off of the skeletons that I created and essentially write, multiple mini essays to properly encapsulate each stage of the hominid development theory, right? Because there's 12 stages, hence 12 episodes, hence series, just as an introduction to ludic theory. Um, and after creating the outline for the series, right, the skeleton for all 12 episodes, essentially I kind of went into a mental recession where where the interest rate was really high. I'm going to stop with this metaphor. I was burnt out and I couldn't keep cashing out on debt that I didn't have, you know what I mean? So, it essentially meant that I I needed to recalibrate internally, because here's the thing with me, right? Everybody works differently, not just how they're wired, but how they create and how they put things together. For me, um, I need long periods of isolation and self reflection to recalibrate internally. And because my work stems from my own specific camera lens, my perspective, right? That I attune and I polish constantly. I'm constantly polishing my, I guess you could call it vision, but I'm really just saying, my ability to perceive and collect information and connect patterns, right? I have a very interdisciplinary approach to my work. I wouldn't have it any other way. I feel like it's incomplete. Um, it's just who I am. And so it essentially means, though, that my being, right, being present and experiencing, I have to keep my ability to perceive in a particular shape, so that I can continue to. It's really interesting. It's almost like my form, my senses are my telescope into the world, if that makes sense. But we're not going to get into that because I don't want I don't want to trigger any derealization in anyone. Like, is this my body? Is this my form? None of that. Am I really awake? Um, yeah, none of that stuff. But I definitely needed time to, again, I'm a very reclusive person. I live a very ascetic life. I'm like a monk without the monastery. I'm in a constant sort of flux of regenerating, regenerating, progenerating. And I could not predict that after January, I would fall into a regenerative stage where there were even things happening in my life as well that were allowing me to um, recalibrate really um, my connection. First of all, my perspective of my connection to my life and to myself and to life as a whole, which is an inherent part of my um, intellectual practice, my theoretical process. So, yeah, that took February and March. April came around and I was starting to work on episode 1, the research. However, things came up behind the scenes that are connected to some of the seeds that I was planting last year with my work with Ludicism that was starting to come back around. And so I was starting to toy with the idea of, um, you know, uh, certain changes to how I'm proceeding with my career here. And when I say here, I mean like as a human being. I don't mean like online. So I was definitely reconfiguring a lot of things with that whilst researching and, whatever. Editing is a Freudian slip, I will tell you, when it comes to the series, because um, in order to get this done, right, I thought I would have this done in April and I'd be able to go live, because I was originally going to make this a live stream, live at the end of April. That was my original idea. Um, I realized very quickly, I was going to have to cut out a lot of things that I wanted to um, naturally segue into for this first episode, right? Which is going into the weeds of stage 3 of the hominid development theory. I should say stage 3 of our species' development, because we are currently now on the precipice between stage 2 and stage 3 for reasons that we will get into in today's video. But I was definitely look, sometimes, and this is a rather unfortunate lesson to learn time and time again. Sometimes, sometimes, sometimes you really just cannot finish the race in the time that you want to finish, right? Like sometimes you are just genuinely exhausted and you can't will yourself to complete something that you have no gas to complete. Like it's just not happening. Um, at some point you have to accept the delusion. and the inclination to delude yourself. So that is what I did. I took my L gracefully. I took it very gracefully. And then April turned into May. And um, May was hard. Like, I'm not going to lie to you, May was hard. But on the plus side, once I realized that there were things I needed to cut out from this series, and or not even just from this series, from this episode, and maybe find ways to integrate it into the rest of the episodes later on, or as entirely separate things, right? Because ludic theory is a huge umbrella, right? And there are a whole bunch of um, sub parts to what amounts to ludic theory. And so I had to realize that, okay, look, this is a separate project, this is a separate project, this is a separate project. These are separate schools of thought. No, they're not. But there's separate aspects of one school of thought. And so, you like ludic theory as a whole can be divided into smaller disciplines is basically what I came to discover as I was putting this all together. Because I realized that, one person can dedicate, or people can dedicate their lives to one aspect of ludic theory and like take it to, the next, not I guess the next level, but it can be a discipline in and of itself. Like democratic anarchy can be an economic or business study, even an anthropological study. Like we can keep going with this: evolutionary biology, socio anthropological, evolutionary, blah blah blah. Like there is a lot here. And putting this together, I was starting to realize that, because I'll be honest, I sell myself short. And that's not because of a self-deprecating thing. It's more, I know where my finish line is mentally. Like, I know what the end picture looks like and what the discipline and my involvement, first of all, sort of the incarnation of the discipline with my research, and then my involvement with the research in multiple facets, how all that's going to look by the end of my time here with this. And I've had to essentially walk it backwards, right? Unfurl it backwards. So where I'm at right now is like rock bottom of the rock bottom. And so in comparison, I'm looking at where I am aiming for this to end up, right? And it looks so small where I'm at, right? And what I have looks so small. But as I was, going through this, I was realizing, I was like, oh no, sis, like, no, like you're gonna need to be real with yourself. Like this is kind of massive. Yeah, so I am not sure if I'm going to be doing the rest of the series as a live stream, because I knew that episode 1 was going to be the hardest to put together because it has to do with modern present day, and there's so much about our world. It's all wrong, by the way. Like, it's all wrong, and this episode, along with episode 2, which is the next episode, will illustrate to you just how wrong. You think you know, but you don't really know yet. And so, yeah, I knew that specifically episode 1 was going to be really hard. Just because there was so much information to organize. It's the organizing of all the information that's quite the feat, and it takes a lot of brain power and a lot of time, because you need breaks from the work in between, because you can't do this kind of big, massive, objective, overarching, interdisciplinary thinking for multiple hours every single day. you need a break, just at least to have like fresh eyes and to not have the fatigue weigh down the conclusions or your ability to make conclusions, if that makes sense. So, yeah, this one is going to be a video because I can go on and I can edit it down, and I'm really content with that. The rest we'll see. I know that there are definitely some episodes that'll be very easy to live stream, so I'll probably live stream those and then upload those VODs, maybe edited down, to YouTube. But this one is going to be directly to YouTube. By the way, before we get started, if you are wondering, right, what ludicism is, what ludic theory is, I implore you, this is my Substack, which is linked. This is ridiculous. There, right? Sarah Empoy, the Ludicist. Just search that up in Substack. You will find this wrong way, wrong. Ludicism and the current global paradigm. Okay, it is apparently a 1 hour read, depending on your reading speed. I don't know. I have condensed. This is a condensed version of an unreleased paper that I'd written. That was sort of the foundation for this. This is a great, concise, very, very, very basic primer on ludicism as a concept, and ludic theory as a whole. So yeah, go have a gander, go have a read. This also illustrates all the stages of the hominids, us, our evolution, right? And as I've stated earlier, we are in between stage 2 and stage 3. So if you want to get a I don't want to say a heads up, but I guess if you want to look ahead as to what will be the concepts that we'll be expanding on in this particular series, right, the hominid development series, go ahead and feel free to look at all of the stages of our evolution that I will be talking about. I also talk about how I even came to create the hominid development theory, and so on and so forth. So there is a lot of stuff in here, like a lot. So yeah. Now let me remove that because nobody wants to look at that. Hi again, it's me. Okay, so let us now get into our cute little PowerPoint. I'm going to change it to, oh wow, freaky. Hey PowerPoint queen. Okay, now let me just say this, and I do not want to hear anybody in the comments, okay? There will be spelling mistakes in this, probably, because I just put this together, I don't want to say haphazardly, but when I got to the realization that I probably should do a PowerPoint to put this together, because originally I was just doing notes, I was like, I am so burnt out and so exhausted by even putting this entire episode together that I was like, let me just put my ideas onto this freaking page and keep it moving, and I'll just do what I do when I'm talking on the mic. So yes, there will probably be spelling mistakes, there will probably be grammatical mistakes, and yes, the document does look ugly. I did not care about trying to make it look cute. Like, I'm at the end of my rope, okay? Okay, so I just haphazardly titled this PowerPoint "The Current Iteration of Intergovernmental Politics." Doesn't that sound so fun and interesting and stimulating? Doesn't this sound like we're gonna have an amazing time? How we are all currently globally connected, and how the country is a thing of the past. Are we about to start shaking things up right now? Country a thing of the past? Girl, what are you talking about? What do you mean? Oh dear. Okay. So, introduction. Oh, By the way, there will be a lot of words on the screen. Don't worry. You don't have to look at the words. Look at me. Okay. We are under the presumption that our states and countries are sovereign, right? Meaning that our leaders and the power they wield protects both the integrity of the establishment and also the people that they represent, right? And that those decisions that they make are free from any influence of any outside party, and the decisions that they can make are free from any caveats that any other nation could put on them. Meaning, say for example, like I'm Canadian, right? So say like the Prime Minister right now, Mr. Trudeau, say for example, he decided, like Canada has like trees and you all need timber. And like we don't want to give it to you unless you give us 300 turtles. I don't know why. That was his decision. 300 turtles. And let's say Biden, our bestie Biden, was like, actually, you can't make that decision because you signed an agreement that in order to be a part of NATO, you had to give us trees for free, right? So it's this idea that through diplomacy, nations could be strong-held into certain positions where they are not able to make independent decisions that are, I guess, the most beneficial to that country at the expense of everybody else, etc., etc. Now, when I say at the expense of everybody else, you'll see, not even only as we just go on through this document here, but even just by looking into the world right now, you'll see that certain standards are not held equally across all the nations, right? Certain things that we find morally wrong and morally reprehensible for a group of nations, another group of nations can get away with, and everyone's like, did y'all hear that? Did you see that? Because I didn't. So there's problems with that as well, but sovereignty, right, is the concept that a nation can make its own decisions and be free to make its own decisions, I guess, without being subordinated by another nation, another greater power. You'll be surprised to know that actually I think only 4 nations are actually declared properly sovereign. China, which is ironic, right, because of how China's demonized in the media. India, which is also ironic, because all of the nations are trying to court India into subordination. Russia, and you see how Russia is painted in the media as well for doing whatever the hell they want to do. And 4th, you knew this was coming, the United States of America. And, well, they do this through a myriad of very funny ways, but it's not in the news. So that right there already makes you question, is sovereignty a good thing? Are countries a good thing if sovereignty is the pinnacle of what it means to be a completely functioning country, right? Because sovereignty in a myriad of ways is also another word for disharmony, right? Like the idea that like it doesn't matter how your actions affect the collective so long as, so long as you can look good to the people at home. Which is ironic then, because then why are you confused about the fact that you've made enemies? If we're not looking out for one another, then we're creating enemies of one another. And if that is what it means to be a true country, are countries a morally correct construct? Are they? Are they morally upstanding? Are they monikers of an evolved species? Are they monikers of an evolved species? Are they? Anyway, but as you see, right, as I'm even just starting to read what I've written here and I'm riffing off these ideas, you can see I how big we're already getting in terms of concepts here, right? And how long, honestly, this video is going to be. And not only that, but why it took me so long to put this together, dear God. Okay, so we are under the presumption that our states and countries are sovereign, that we successfully separate ourselves from our border neighbors and discriminate based on those terms, right? Like I said, the idea of harmony and disharmony, creating enemies if we're not creating community. That's the essence of sovereignty. It's the essence of country. That we are individuals. Oh, I was like, I knew I said that there were some proper errors in this, but turns out I just can't read. Call me Leah Michelle. That there are individual interests that need to be served at the cost of the collective, and that those interests are special and vested. Wars should be started over them, right? Wars should be started over those interests, those vested interests that are deemed, dignified and worthy, and this is the hill we'll die on, and yes, we need to destabilize this country so that we can get their oil for pennies on the dollar and then call them savages because they're poor, because we won't let them sell us their oil at a fair price, and then we'll manipulate the media to get everybody to hate them and call them destabilizing other nations. Oh my, what? What was the point of me writing this? Because I'm jumping ahead of myself. Destabilizing other nations socially, politically, economically to obtain the upper hand is justified and encouraged, and that the borders and the crests they adorn on our chests, Taylor Swift could never, dictate that there are outsiders, and that those outsiders will always be outsiders, not our concern, and in the worst and increasingly common case, our enemy. This is one thing that will always make me laugh about our collective philosophy regarding how we are socialized as a global collective. Because what do you mean that you get to berate and inflict pain on and suffering on another person because you don't share the same crest, and then you turn around and cry when the exact same thing is done to you? You've set the precedent. You have essentially affirmed the fact that this is how we operate here on this planet, and that this is all we are capable. This is the only we are capable of interacting with each other on this planet as one species. Like, why are you crying now? Why are you crying? That we are independent nations that exist on our own. Nations that can exist on their own while effectively serving the inhabitants within each border. Let's move on. But we've already seen, however, what is that sentence? It's not a sentence. It's part of one. I was tired when I wrote. It's fine. But we've already seen, however, the people who are actually civically in charge of making decisions that stabilize the foundation of society have already seen that in order to create prosperity, you should not create artificial adversaries, that we can only exist in harmony, integrated beyond the construct of countries. Are you listening? Are your ears open? Even our leaders, right? We all live in countries, right? We all have our borders, right? We're all separating each other from each other. But even the leaders of those entities, those states of being, right? Those puzzle pieces that we've sectioned off, they realize that In order to exist in harmony, integrated, we can only exist beyond the construct of countries. Hence, the existence of these intergovernmental bodies. Now, what's an intergovernmental body? I'm going to move on to this next slide here, and then I'm going to go back. An international organization, also known as an intergovernmental organization or an international institution, is an organization that is established by a treaty or is an instrument governed by international law and possessing its own legal personality, such as the United Nations, the World Health Organization, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, and NATO. Now, we have beef with almost every single organization for a myriad of reasons. We will get to that later. But I swear, I see the term NATO and I physically, imperial nastiness. It's just, ugh. Anyway, international organizations are comprised of primarily member states, but may also include other entities, such as international organizations, firms, and non-governmental organizations. Additionally, entities, including states, may hold observer status. So that's like, we don't participate in any votes or anything like that, but we can sit and watch and by sitting and watching, you can see how things are unfolding, and that might be important to your work, right? To your work, to your practice, to what it is that you are providing for the public sector as a whole. An alternative definition is that an international organization is a stable set of norms and rules meant to govern the behavior of states and other actors in the international system. Have you followed? Are you getting it now? Okay. And these bodies lead policies that influence every facet of human life under the influence of the construct of civilization, no matter where you live in the world. So, if you as a human being live in a civilization, if you are interested in not being a person of the wild, living amongst the bears and fending for your life against the wolves, okay? If you are quite literally, you're creating your own fire, you're sourcing your own water, you have no connection to any grid anywhere, right? There's no record of you even being born, okay? No healthcare, no firefighting services, no nothing, okay? Nothing. Then this doesn't apply to you. And apparently, if you read online, a lot of you think you're like this, but you're really not. But it's fine. It's okay. So, to continue to perpetrate the construct of civilization, to continue to lead a life under the construct of civilization, of what it means to be a civilization, these bodies, these intergovernmental bodies, they lead policies that influence every facet of human life. You might be like, no, they don't. Just you wait. Just you wait until you see just how interconnected the world has already been from time. You might be even thinking, the 1900s, keep going back, and realizing that it was on the international stages that these policies were created, that then these governments of countries used to, I guess you could say, continue civilization, but to keep their leg of the entire body, right, the collective body, firm, to not be the weakest link, right? And all of those have influenced the way policy is made in your own country, how business is done, what access to things you have, all of that. And it trickles down, right? Now, this is not the same thing as the trickle down economics. That's bullshit. We're not even going to talk about that. But in terms of policy and us being a collective as one whole, a collective on earth, I meant to say, you'd be surprised how non-sovereign and non-independent every single nation in the world is. And not only that, but already think of it this way. Like, imagine if someone that belonged to one country, one crust, invented something and it was only allowed to stay in that country, and you living in another country were not allowed to have access to it because you're not of said nationality. Think about that already. How many life-saving drugs, insulin being one of them that comes to mind for me, because, you know, I just said I'm Canadian, and insulin was created here in the city, Toronto. So imagine every facet of our lives, physically, there are obvious monikers of this, but it's difficult to be able to see ideologically and governmentally how the idea of separate sovereign countries has not only degraded over time, but was never a construct that really ever actually made sense if you looked at it objectively. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me drink some water and then I'll continue this. I'll finish off this statement here and then move on to the next slide. Okay. It is minds in these institutions from the moment they were founded to present day that influence the very fabric of everyday life for every human being participating in civilization, right? Civilization as a system, which I think is a good one to have, but we can and should tweak exactly what it means to be in a civilization now, modern day, present day, and we will get to that. That has to do with stage 3 and stage 4, but baby steps. We need to talk about stage 3 first, then stage 2, then we'll move on to talking about stage 4 in episode 3. Okay, next. So we already read this, so let's just move on to this one. International law, as we know it today, has its foundations from the legal treatise, The Law of Nations, published in the 1700s. Are you hearing this? We are in 2024. We are just hit the middle of 2024. It's going to be June in like 4 days. Let me check my calendar here. That's the calculator. What am I doing? Yeah, the first is on Saturday, which I figured, right? So 3 days. I was actually right. Let me go. So we have just hit the mid-mark of 2024, right? Which is almost the mid-mark of the 2020s, right? Like, we're going to be in 2025 soon. Like, that's kind of crazy. The 1700s. The 1700s. This cute little baby here was published. 1700s. All right. The 18th century. We are now in the 21st century. You're starting to see why things are so fucked up? Look at how much time we've had in between these periods here to understand where we're at in our evolution, and we have yet to. Don't worry, I'll help you out there. These rules, norms, and standards are generally recognized as binding and operates largely through consent, since there is no universally accepted authority to enforce it upon sovereign states. In the 18th century, 1700s, a legal treatise, a treatise is sometimes termed learned treatise. Treatise? Listen, I don't know what I wrote here. I wrote something. It's something. Is an extensive and exhaustive encyclopedia like book on a specific subject, usually a legal topic. A thorough analysis of a field of law, detailing its principles and rules, and illustrating those principles and rules through examples, right? That's what a treatise is. That's what this was, written in the 1700s. But this one was called The Law of Nations by international lawyer Emmerich de Vattel. Emmerich de Vattel, to address issues that dropped. It dropped off. To address issues that cropped up This is really embarrassing for me. Look, I'm underslept. This took everything out of me. We're here though, and I will struggle through this, damn it, just to get it done, okay? To address issues that cropped up due to mercantilist economies. All right, mercantilism. Let's get into it. Yeah. Don't you like my cute little picture here? I like it's, like the law and like the handcuffs because like you're doing something bad, and like money because it's always for money. Economy and nation. Mercantilism is a nationalist economic policy that is designed to maximize the exports and minimize the imports for an economy. So essentially, getting other nations to buy things from you, but you are not going to buy anything from them because you're going to try and, create everything that your population needs in-house and then create such a surplus that you can only sell that off to, people in other nations who need that. So it's kind of this idea of like, we are never, why the hell? You know what? I'm not even going to make that joke. I'm really disappointed in myself for that. Okay. So essentially kind of being like, companies, are really only trying to sell. I mean, obviously, but like, when I say provide for their nation, I mean like, they provide goods for people to buy, and then but they create so much that they sell it off to other nations. It's a very wasteful thing because a lot of the times the things that they were creating, they needed resources from nations that they had to go pillage to get the resources from, right? Because I mean, you're one, first of all, being very wasteful. So no one is trying to manage how, any kind of resource quota to make sure that things are not going into deficit, and I mean like actual resources. And so once things are completely depleted, where do you go, right? To continue your economy, you have to sail far and wide, and with guns and cannons and friggin' like, do stuff to people in order to get what's in the ground or on their trees or on the stems, on the leaves. Oh my god, Dr. Seuss. In other words, it seeks to maximize the accumulation of resources within the country and use those resources for one-sided trade. The policy aims to reduce a possible current account deficit or reach a current account surplus, and it includes measures aimed at accumulating monetary reserves by a positive balance of trade, especially of finished goods. This is what I'm saying. It wasn't like they were getting resources from the ground and then selling raw materials, right? So that the other nation could then, create those and then sell them back, or in any way, shape, or form. It was, we are going to maximize everything in-house, and we're going to make sure that, everybody buys this specific thing from us, and we're going to make sure that nobody else has access to this, and we're going to make sure that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's diabolical, but, we won't get into the complete delusion, the complete... I almost said something crazy, but like the complete decomposition of human logic, like the complete decomposition of brain capacity. We'll get to that in the next episode, which we will be going over stage 2, which goes way more into, our relationship with the earth and resources and such, and our construct of possessions and sharing, or rather, our concept of possessions and sharing. It'll be interesting, I promise. Okay. Historically, such policies might have contributed to war and motivated colonial expansion. Gee. Mercantilist theory varies in sophistication from one writer to another and has evolved over time. We're not going to get into that because it's relevant. Mercantilism promotes government regulation of a nation's economy for the purpose of augmenting and bolstering state power at the expense of rival nation powers. So basically, kings and queens were still very much a thing here. And I'm not too sure how much of mercantilism was liberal in the sense of liberal capitalism. I'm not too sure what the ratio to that was. How much of these were independent actors versus actors acting on behalf of the state or the crown. However, yes, if the state, if the crown wanted to have a nation that didn't belong to them, that is what they did. They did that. And we're still seeing the repercussions of that today. They did that. Okay. High tariffs, especially on manufactured goods, were almost universally a feature in mercantilist policy. I believe this would have been, for example, like, if two nations were creating, let's say, I don't know, a steel bowl. Look, we have fun here. A steel bowl, right? If Nation 1 wanted to sell their steel bowls to Nation 2, then Nation 2 would put high tariffs on Nation 1's bowls so that the people in Nation 2 would buy Nation 2's bowls rather than Nation 1's bowls, and vice versa. I think I said that right. I was like Nation 1 and Nation 2. Okay. Before it fell into decline, mercantilism was dominant in modernizing parts of Europe and some areas in Africa from the 16th to the 19th centuries, a period of proto-industrialization. Some commentators argue that it is still practiced in the economies of industrializing countries in the form of economic interventionism. Let's talk about this. A market intervention, economic intervention, is a policy or measure that modifies or interferes with a market, typically done in the form of state action, but also by philanthropic and political action groups. Market interventions can be done for a number of reasons, including as an attempt to correct market failures or, more broadly, to promote public interests or protect the interests of specific groups. Are we trying to get spicy and angry today? Let's see. The reality is that market intervention in the majority of the industrializing nations, so in some cases proto-industrializing nations, is often done so that the bottom line of the top percent is not threatened, and oftentimes that 1% are actually foreign actors in these international markets. We'll come back to that. It's remnants today. Mercantilism, remnants today. International law itself is also corrupted by holding onto stage 2 through the manipulation of the consent process. States, countries can no longer even fully be sovereign and will always be subject to players who wield power on the global stage. I don't know what I'm trying to say there. In the same way, the monetary token is also consolidated, not the United States. Oh, I said this is not the United States. Not the United States. So, we see this time and again, right? How the consent process is manipulated. Like I just said, right? Market intervention is one way. There are a whole bunch of incentives that can be dangled in front of a population that has nothing to lose and everything to lose, in the sense of like, you know, they're constantly stuck between a rock and a hard place as a result of cumulative systemic subjugation that continues to this day in many forms, market intervention being one of them. But yeah, no nation right now, whether they are in a financially sound or a financially turbulent era of their existence, no country really is sovereign because of the motivation of the consent process. As I said, I don't really know how else to flip it, bop it, and I said here, this is note the United States and how they conduct international affairs. Military bases, sanctions, by basing every sort of international monetary fund on the US dollar, which was definitely something that nations were not interested in the very beginning. And it took a lot of persuasion and market intervention and, capitalizing on wars and purposely destabilizing economies due to the fragile nature of, popular trust in whatever government was sitting, because of, the fact that life sucked and it still sucks under the monetary market system, right? Under the use of the monetary token, which is also something that we will talk about in this series. Is it this episode or the next one? I honestly can't remember. It's all a blur. Look, this is how it is, right? Everyone's problems are each other's problems. Everything creates a ripple effect, with the way things are set up. If one country has a victory, then it could be that a small group of countries also have a victory, but it sends negative consequences for the rest of everybody else, and vice versa. And sometimes it's not a group, sometimes it's one, and it has a huge effect, and so on and so forth. And this is across the spectrum: economically, politically, socially. Sovereign who? Country who? Anyway, let's keep going. Oh yeah, this was supposed to. I forgot to remove this slide. I'm gonna add a graph. Eventually, obviously not in this episode. I don't know if it's I believe it might be episode 2. I think I might have wrote that down for episode 2. But this was going to be a graph that documented globalization that signals the oncoming ludic evolution to stage 3. It was here that humanity should have noted the need to come together as the level of resettlement, accompanied by the technical evolution that had not yet been seen in our collective history, 1700s. So 1700s really was the beginning of us recognizing our collective consciousness, or maybe even collective subconscious, the tendrils of evolution, one that is separate from human logic, right? Like the evolutionary force that moves through all of nature, us being also a part of nature, that is removed from our own internal narrative, our own internal dialogue with ourselves and the world around us, was already ushering us in the 1700s to move on to stage 3. We are in 2024 now, and we are still in between stage 2 and stage 3, just like we were in the 1700s. There is a reason why everything is so fucked up. There is a reason why, right? Think about it. If things are continuing to grow and are trying to break out of their their molds, what do you get if you don't allow them to evolve in the shape that they're trying to evolve in? You get mutations. You get deformities. What do you think we're looking at society right now? We'll get to that. Okay, so 19 agencies of the main system that acts as the global governmental body, right? So these are not all, but I think I just put the ones that fit onto the slide, because I obviously made this into a picture. I just put a bunch of logos onto the canvas and was like, I don't feel like trying to fit any more onto this. This is good enough. And it is. So these 19 agencies of the main system cover these categories: food, humanity, development, logistic networks, and environmental. Now, food, self-explanatory. Humanity, the concept of humans, the construct of humans, like what does it mean to be human, and how is that to be protected in the world at large? We'll get to it. It sounds very theoretical, but it's really not. Development, obviously, this is infrastructure, logistics networks, communication and such, and environmental, self-explanatory. We'll get to this. Okay, first, food. Look at the cute little picture here of bare tomatoes. What can you even make with this? Tomatoes? Is that broccoli? That is a very dry looking broccoli. Do you eat broccoli that's this yellow? Since when? 2 limes? Do you put lime in your broccoli with bare tomatoes? This is very unsettling. Carrots? Is that, I don't think that's a beet. What is that? Bread? And then lettuce sticking out of the bread? Iconic. Okay. First up here, we have the FAO, the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations. Now, obviously, now we're going through all of the global governmental bodies that influence us collectively as one entire species, since you want to be so serious in your defense that humanity and countries are a thing, like an actual thing. Like, okay. Um Leads international efforts to defeat hunger and improve nutrition and food security. How? It helps governments and development agencies coordinate their activities to improve and develop agriculture, forestry, fisheries, and land and water resources. It also conducts research, provides technical assistance to projects, operates educational and training programs, and collects agricultural output, production, and development data. Let me just read this first sentence again. It helps governments and development agencies coordinate their activities to improve and develop everything we just said: agriculture, forestry, fisheries, and land and water resources. On top of conducting research, providing technical assistance to projects, collecting data, and operating educational and training programs. Like, this is not small. Like, is it connecting? Okay. Important note, the first inclinations towards breaching stage 3 were in the late 19th century. Okay. So, 1700s, the tendrils of breaching into stage 3, but it took us until the 19th century where we started to create actual entities that would allow us to begin broaching practically stage 3, which we have not stepped foot in completely yet, even in 2024. But we'll get into that. So, right, hence the ideation emerging of an international organization for food and agriculture, advanced primarily canonically. And I say canonically in parentheses because oftentimes we find that that people who were integral to huge change and movements are removed from the narrative if they were not at the time viewed as people who were allowed to give contributions. So, but it is, I'm going to say it is what it is, but so, um, advanced primarily canonically by Polish-born American agriculturalist and activist. When I say activist, it's not like activism when you think of like political activism of like, like equality for all. Anyway, David Lubin which started as a way to help American farmers. Sometime after 1891, he began campaigning for subsidies and protection for farmers, initially in California, but eventually on an international scale. And I think this was taken from Wikipedia, I mean, obviously. In his new vocation of farmer, Wikipedia, my beloved, there came to him the idea of an international agricultural congress, whereby one side of the globe might learn what the other side was producing and how and at what cost. You see? Already thinking and recognizing the benefit of not trying to act like we are all separate entities. In May to June of 1905, an international conference was held in Rome, Italy, which led to the creation of the International Institute of Agriculture, IIA, by the King of Italy, Victor Emmanuel III. The IIA was the first intergovernmental organization to deal with the problems and challenges of agriculture on a global scale. It worked primarily to collect, compile, and publish data on agriculture, ranging from output statistics to a catalog of crop diseases. Among its achievements was the publication of the first agricultural census in 1930. So here is a page out of the first agricultural census. And I've just colored in on the map which countries were included. Now, obviously, this was 1930, so it should be quite obvious that all of the nations that were a part of this census were either European or colonized by European nations. Is there a zoom button? Oh, I think, yeah, here. Okay, so I just wanted to read the names real quick, right? Austria, Belgium, Czechoslovakia, which doesn't exist anymore. I believe it's Slovakia and Czech Republic now. Denmark, Estonia, Finland, France, Canada, woohoo, United States, outlining territories and possessions of the United States. That is, to even call it possessions of the United States is crazy, but I mean, if we put next to each of these countries possessions of the British Crown, like possessions of like, anyway, Mexico, Argentina, Chile, Peru, Uruguay, Germany, Greece, Irish Free State. I do believe Ireland was separated into two states at this point. One belonged to the British Crown and the other was the Free State, right, as they put here. Italy, Latvia, Lithuania, Netherlands, Norway, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, United Kingdom, right? There's Northern Ireland, there it is, Scotland, England, and Wales. India, Japan, Algeria, Egypt, French West Africa, Kenya, Mauritius, Mozambique, Union of South Africa, Commonwealth of Australia, and New Zealand. Yas. Okay, how do we escape? Oh, there we go. Thank you. So I just decided to color everything in green because, green pastures and, agriculture and fertile land, arable land. Next. Okay, the institution's goals were to help farmers share knowledge, produce systematically, establish a cooperative system of rural credit, and have control over the marketing of their products. Even separated by an ocean, people of the same vocation and contribution had no choice but to work under a unified system defying the construct of nation because it's the inherent thing to do. It's really that simple. It's really that simple. You have to work as one because you are one. Like, if you don't, you come up with more problems than harmony or solutions. Like, that's it. It's really that simple. I believe this was also taken from Wikipedia here. He also took a keen interest in farmers, cooperative societies, and granges, and was interested in oceanic shipping. I don't know why I put that. I think maybe the oceanic shipping was sort of tying back to the whole international thing. Whatever. Okay. So we were talking about farming and agriculture. Let's talk about things that cause hunger, right? Impoverished conditions caused by historical colonialism and modern day subjugation. Colonialism and subjugation are kind of the same thing, so I didn't bother saying historical subjugation, historical and modern day subjugation. I wanted to make sure that I said colonialism because T. Um, Now, tied to the first point, the lack of infrastructure and information to address the needs of a growing population slash a dependency on foreign aid due to native knowledge being erased through generations of subjugation. Now, let's not forget that an integral part of colonization was stripping the native people of their native heritage. This is why many people have last names that are not related to their native ethnic languages. Um, it's why, people have a have a bigger allegiance to religions, colonial religions, than they do their native religions and traditions. Why that's witchcraft and why that's whatever have you. Um, there there's a lot here. Okay. Um, but as we spoken about, right, modern day subjugation, right, the um neo-colonial market interventions by nations that just it is in their best interest to keep the nations with the wealthiest resources impoverished so that these nations can continue living a life of comfort and luxury that's incredibly exploitative and very, very destructive to earth. It's really that simple. And war, direct, indirect, or by proxy, right? Direct war, face to face, my country, your country, boom. Indirect war, it's like, oh, this is like Cold Wars or sanctions or whatever have you. And proxy is quite literally creating, I don't know if it's nation states or entities that are, that act as destabilizing forces in certain regions. Excuse me. It's like they're essentially you in ethnic uniform, like low key. Um anyway, um now that's in general, right? But we need to talk about the imperial core because the imperial core, despite its vast amounts of wealth through its systemic historical pillaging, um the imperial core is hungry, right? And why is that? That is because of a non-socialist economic structure. That means what? It means that for all the pillaging and for all of the benefits, that even if they're not actively pillaging right now or they are not part of any collective, like a NATO, that participates in modern day subjugation, um, that say you're not even in one of those, but you still reap the rewards of having the favors been the I guess the the world being tipped in your favor because of what's the precedent that has been set due to the actions of your ancestors, right? Um, and you're still, as a collective, as a country, reaping the benefits of that. Which, by the way, I don't think there is any country who participated in that in the past that isn't part of a collective that is continuing to do modern day versions of that. Um, in fact, ooh, that's some tea. We're not even going to go there. Um, but despite the vast amounts of wealth concentrated in these nations, that money is not socialized. It's not invested adequately and efficiently into public resources, right? And in the case of hunger, that results in children on food programs, people relying on food banks, not having the material resources to provide meals for their households. Um, it's kind of embarrassing. Like, if you're already going to buy into the construct of country and sovereignty and the us versus them mentality, and you're going to die on that hill, and you're not even going to be living like a king or queen for it, like, that's an L. It kind of is, you know what I mean? Like, you've only halfway won, which is crazy to me. This is not me advocating, by the way, to continue this structure so long as the human rights of the nation are looked after, um, at the expense of where all the wealth came from. But it's funny. It's a funny, like, huh, okay, like, which is also why it's so interesting that people in the imperial core are so against socialism. Now, obviously, I'm not a socialist, because to be a socialist, I would have to believe in the monetary token, which I do not, because I am a ludicist. Ooh, what's that? We'll get to that when we talk about stage 4, which will be in episode 3. However, for people who are, I say people who are as if they are aware of any alternative, or aware of the fact that the life that we live right now it was never supposed to be permanent. Evolution means existing in a state of transience always. And so, it's kind of embarrassing, kind of like watching people who greatly benefit from imperialism be against socialism, because you're literally saying, pillage and kill all of these other neighbors, on our behalf, right? Because we carry this passport. Do it on our behalf, but I still want to live in poverty, though. It's like all of that pillaging and othering is completely in vain if you don't believe in socialism. That's what's so crazy about it. Like, it's just so embarrassing for you. It's so embarrassing. Anyway, next. Map of colonialization, right? There's a reason for this. But essentially what I'm trying to illustrate, right, is that things that cause hunger, the entire world is hungry for different reasons, right? As we've just talked about, the rest of the world and the imperial core. Map of colonization, these are all countries that have been colonized completely. Partially colonized was China here. Literally, I need you to remember this, okay? So all of this, reeling from the effects of this, right? Hunger, impoverished conditions caused by historical colonialism and modern day subjugation. I want to talk about Canada here for a moment. Obviously, the native populations here, their hunger stems from that. The rest of Canada, though, from this. You might be looking at me like, what about you? I'm from here, right? Like, my family lineage is from here, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is like, ooh, interesting timing, right? Considering everything that people are talking about with Palestine and Sudan and the Congo, and interesting. So went from my family went from like one area here to like here. So yeah, it's very fun. Now, map of current wars, right? Because like we said here, things that cause hunger: war, direct, indirect, or proxy. Current wars. This is the map of current wars. Now compare this. Like, look, see how Russia was one of the one nations here that was completely clear? Look at that. So take a look at this. Imagine now all the nations here that were colonized and now are still also in war. Like, can we talk about that? Like, their conditions in particular are crazy. And there's, look, a nation there, Democratic Republic of Congo. Yes. By the way, this is like current 2024. So, which is why Russia and Ukraine are on this map here. In any case, so let's take a look at the nations here that are clear here. Let's take a look on map of wars. Look at that. All of West Asia, all of Russia, and these nations here, right? Here and here. War. All right? So nations that were not colonized, you thought, oh, we're free of that, are currently in war. All right? So that takes off too, right? Colonialism and war. Now, what is so fantastic, right? Compare these two maps, colonization and map of current wars. There is one region only, that is completely unaffected by both of these maps. Do you notice it? You see it? Back and forth, back and forth. Yeah, interesting, huh? Interesting. See, this is what we mean by, tied to the first point, lack of infrastructure and information to address the needs of growing population and dependency on foreign aid due to native knowledge being erased through generations of subjugation. Lack of infrastructure and information through generations of subjugation. The remnants of this. It's really, I mean, and the most powerful political powers, the most powerful political groups include nations solely from these regions, with people who originate from this region as well. This leads me to another topic under the ludic umbrella theory called Anglo-Psychosia, but we will leave that for another day. That's an entirely separate thing. We're not going to cover that in this series, but it's very important. And you might be surprised to know that I'm very sympathetic to the plight of those who ancestrally hail from Europe, because they do not realize the predicament that they're in right now. And it's not the predicament that's been outlined by any academic or scholar, even the news, in any way, shape, or form. There is a huge point that people are missing in general. And I'm very excited to delve into that, because I think it's, when we talk about leaving a legacy for our children, when we talk about thinking more objectively and understanding our responsibility and our agency and the construct of consciousness and how we wield that, there is a lot to learn from what has transpired in recent human history through how those of European descent have conducted themselves over the past couple of centuries. It is very fascinating, and I think it's very exciting because it's enlightening. It's enlightening, and I'm honestly kind of humbled to be able to recognize it and to be able to pass this on when I do. But it means a lot to me because it means we're on the path to collective healing, which is also a huge part of stage 3, which we will get to in a moment. I don't really know how many slides away we are from that though. So let's continue forward. Okay. The next entity, we're not going to go through all 19. I don't believe I put all 19 here. The second entity here, WPF, the World Food Program, right, provides emergency food assistance worldwide. This ties into the hunger construct that we were talking about earlier, right? So in fact, the WFP aims to try and bandage the gaps with its worldwide food assistance program as the collective grapples between holding onto stage 2 and moving into stage 3. When I say grapples between holding onto stage 2 and moving into stage 3, I don't mean that, what we're experiencing now is a natural byproduct of transition. No. What we're experiencing right now is the result of us being completely reluctant to move on collectively, and how in how we organize our construct of what a civilization is. That's a big time for us. Anyway, by being the leading provider of school meals, providing assistance in areas of conflict, and to prevent the use of food as a weapon of war and conflict. Now, that's hilarious, right? Because, however, The humanitarian crisis in Sudan and Palestine are clear examples as to how these efforts can be compromised in the integrity of these and the integrity of these efforts challenged. Because remember, right? The World Food Program is part of the United Nations, which is centralized where? Here. This nation right here, which is in huge coalition with this area here, which we see completely untouched, right? Because you have to remember, the people here, the majority of the people here, they hail from here, this region, right? This untouched region. Now, it's so crazy. If countries did not exist, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Because the conflicts that arise that have predicated our history and our historical resentments towards one another have been on the basis of sovereign nation. It's done more harm than good. People in war-torn countries now can't eat because food is being used as a weapon. Because now we're siding with someone who is, when I say we, I mean institutionally, we're siding with, it's just interesting. Remember how I said earlier how standards are not held the same, which is dumb anyway, because it's like sovereignty and country are constructs that do not exist. Okay, next. So, 1 year into its forgotten war, right? We're talking about Sudan here. Just a brief little, I believe I only dedicated one slide to this. Right, yeah. And, okay. So, 1 year into its forgotten war, Sudan is a blood-soaked playground barreling towards famine. As a major humanitarian catastrophe unfolds, worst-case projections say the country could see 10,000 daily deaths in the coming months. Now, this was written April 14th, 2020. We are now May 29th, 2020. This is 2024. My goodness. Yeah, April 14th, 2024, I should say. Did I say 2020? Yeah. So, over a month now. And the situation has not gotten better. Okay, 1 year into its forgotten war, Sudan is a blood-soaked playground barreling towards famine. As a major humanitarian catastrophe unfolds, worst-case projections say the country could see 10,000 daily deaths in the coming months. Deaths in Sudan can reach 10,000 per day in the coming months if this mass displacement of people caused by a year-long civil war sparks famine. Then people are like, oh, well, it's civil war. Hold on. The dire projection, which represents a worst-case scenario and would put the conflict on par with the worst days of the Battle of Somme, was being urgently debated by Western envoys and diplomats this week. Other actors, including the World Food Program, say the estimates are exaggerated, but accept that a major humanitarian catastrophe is unfolding. Aims to try and bandage the gaps, being the leading provider, providing assistance in areas of conflict, and to prevent the use of food as a weapon of war and conflict. Nowhere does it say it gauges whether or not it is necessary to intervene when the precipice of whether or not enough people are starving for us to, like, it doesn't say that. It doesn't say that. People are starving, so go and feed them. That was your mission, right? Provides emergency food assistance worldwide. Otherwise, why are you getting funding? Why do you have a say then otherwise? Just a question. Just a question. I'm just asking questions. Okay. Monday marks the first anniversary of Sudan's forgotten war, one that has been overshadowed in the Western media by the conflicts in Ukraine and Gaza. Yet the suffering caused by the fighting is immense, and the geopolitical ramifications far from insignificant. It is already the world's biggest single displacement crisis, with up to 11 million people, including 4 million children, forced from their homes and farms. 11 million people. You know what? Let's see. Cities with a population of 11 million. Let's see. Cities with a population of, not 11. Sorry, not 10. Let's do 11. Thank you. Oh, they don't have, okay, let's go back then. So, 15 more. Look at this. Look at this shit. 10 million, so less still than the amount of people being displaced. Delhi, what, in India, a country of what, 1.2 billion people? Population of India, Queen. 1.4. And China is also 1.4. Oh, since when have they gotten so neck and neck? Anyway, a nation of 1.4 billion people. Delhi, bro. Delhi. Mexico City. I mean, Cairo, yeah. New York City. Imagine the entire population of New York City and then some migrating all at once. You guys, Lagos, Rio, Mumbai. More than this. More than Mumbai, more than Rio, more than Lagos, more than New York. Shanghai, Sao Paulo, Buenos Aires, Manila, Chongqing, Moscow, Bangkok. Guys, like, this is Beijing, Tokyo. It's Guangzhou, Kolkata, Jakarta, Seoul, London. Like, guys, is it clicking yet? Is it clicking yet? Is it clicking? This is so sad, bro. This is so sad. Millions of refugees have fled into neighboring Chad and South Sudan, and across the region, some 25 million people are now unable to feed themselves properly. 25 million people and 11 million people displaced. And the World Food Program wants to say that estimates are exaggerated. The estimates that we already have are proving. Like, that is so crazy to me. The high horse, even, that the World Food Program has the authority to even speak on this, like to be in the position to say something. And it's under the jurisdiction or the influence, right? Because like I said, there's no sovereign nation except for 4, right? And where's the World Food Program and the United Nations headquartered? In the United States, one of the 4 sovereign nations who can do whatever the hell they want and who can use the rules and, you know, whatever to their advantage, however they see fit. And you're still poor. You're still poor. You, the average American, is crazy to me. But we're not even going to get into that. Just wow. Okay. And across the region, some 25 million people are now unable to feed themselves properly, with at least 5 million on the cusp of famine. According to the United Nations, the UN refugee chief said on Friday that Sudanese refugees can make their way to Europe if humanitarian aid was not stepped up. And this is what's so irritating, right? This is what is so fucking irritating to me. Because this right here, right, could migrate their way to Europe, right, if humanitarian aid was not stepped up. These people who were, first of all, in their own country, battling with, take a look at the map. Like, take a look at the fucking map. Take a look at it. Okay? Take a look at it. Take a look. Right? Colonized and at war. Right? By European nations. Civil war, which we'll get to here, historical context, we'll get to that in a moment, by outside players. Right? Outside players in the imperial core. Then they're displaced. Then they go to Europe. And then Europeans are like, we don't need the scum of the earth coming here. Go back to your country. the country you took from them? Like, and I'm not saying this to vilify Europeans. It might sound like I am, but I'm not. And you might say that I should be, but I don't. I don't see the point in that. There's a reason why. We'll get to it. Not in this episode. I have an entire philosophy behind this, but it doesn't matter. Um, it's like you just kind of sit back and you're like, it's so fascinating to see people's blind spots presented to you in real time. You're only saying what you're saying because you don't know what you don't know, but you're talking as if you know. And that doesn't stop the person from being completely confident in being wrong. And then when you tell them they're wrong, they're like, "Oh, well, I didn't know." And it's like, "Well, think about the harm you inflicted acting under the presumption that you did know." There is a way that we conduct ourselves in general as humans that is very primitive. And conversations like this is like a surefire way of seeing that in full display, which is part of the reason why I'm just kind of like, it's kind of embarrassing for you. Like, it's kind of embarrassing. Like, like I guess it's easy for people to be mad about it. Like, yeah, but like, it's just kind of like, it's just embarrassing. It's just embarrassing. I don't, it's unfortunate. Okay, anyway, the World Health Organization, meanwhile, said time was running out. There are only seeing the tip of the iceberg. Oh, we are only seeing the tip of the iceberg, and the situation could be much more dire, said a spokesperson. Sudan has become a blood-soaked playground for regional powers, including the United Arab Emirates and Russia, who are arming and backing the warring sides. The worst case of 10,000 deaths a day would put the conflict on course to rival some of the world's worst humanitarian disasters in recent memory. Yeah. Yeah. Now this is really interesting, right? The introduction, right, of Russia, which is one of the only other four sovereign nations, United Arab Emirates, which is like an anomaly in and of themselves. They're so wealthy on oil money, like it's just funny. Um, seeing them, trying to conduct themselves in the same way the imperial core has, to try and clamor some of the oh, clamor what has worked so well for the imperial core. They are completely wealthy and drowning in wealth based off of how they've conducted themselves historically. And collectively, when the mindset is, you know accumulate as much resources and as much wealth is a construct, but so I should just say accumulate as much resources, um to which power is tied to, because power in this instance is not exactly generated. It's more like it's stolen from the collective, right? This is ghetto. Like, humanity is ghetto. Anyway, right. Okay, that was from the Telegraph, right? I made sure to put that here. So, historical context. I wish I knew where I'd gotten this from, but I saw it and I thought it was interesting, so I'm gonna put it here. There's something here that I did actually give credit to someone. It's just a video. We'll listen to it in a minute. Okay, so why is Sudan at risk for famine when it was once considered the world's breadbasket? Sudan's abundant natural resources encompass gold, fertile agricultural lands, the Nile River, gum, Arabic, uranium, which we know France has been quaking over. Why the sort of you know I don't want to call it rebellion, because the fact that like there was subjugation to begin with is just so depressing. But um France is shitting bricks over that, um as are other nations, but France in particular, because I think I can't remember the percentage, how much of it is of their electricity is nuclear. um is nuclear based, and they don't have uranium in their country. They don't have it there. So how exactly are they powering their homes? Questions. Um, Iron ore and more have been extracted and exploited by colonial actors and others, right? Colonial actors, as we've talked about the Imperial Core, and others, as we've talked about United Arab Emirates and Russia. Um, okay, the Jazeera, Gezira, I don't know how to pronounce that scheme, among the world's largest irrigation projects, positioned El Gezira, Gezira, oh, state as Sudan's premier agricultural hub. After the invasion of key cities in El Gezira by the RSF, however, and the forced displacement of over 500,000 people, that agricultural process has been disrupted, meaning reduced food supply across Sudan. As we know, the RSF, like many in quotations, rebel groups around the world, just serve as proxies, right, for the imperial core. Like we said, things that cause hunger, war. I'm like rhyming like crazy today. It's actually kind of incredible. Um, like I said, the imperial core and ethnic suits. Um, right. Um, but also oftentimes, right, like what we also see is that a region is so destabilized by other proxy groups, um, incentivized by so many other things like outside factors and outside actors, um, that it seems obvious that, like, the quickest way to a payday is disrupting the things that actually generate money for the nation. Um, anyway, and yeah, Sudan's susceptibility to climate change, that's always going to be a factor. But yeah, marks it as one of the most vulnerable nations, facing heightened drought frequency and significant rainfall variability. This strains rain-fed agriculture and pastoralist systems, fostering unstable crop production and the depletion of vital land and water resources. Isn't that what's so crazy? The imperial core garners and takes its wealth from nations that have been historically colonized, and with that wealth lives so engorgingly that the earth continues to be depleted, and the people who suffer for that, on top of the original suffrage of being pillaged and killed for your resources, suffer the hardest and the first from climate change, which, by the way, people in the imperial core have a vested interest in acting like doesn't exist. Meanwhile, people are dying because of this. It's actually it's evil in so many ways. It's Remember when I said mutation and deformity? This is what I mean. For this to exist in the same mouths that tout and pride themselves on championing human rights, and, purity, morality, upstanding nobility, is the term Anglo-psychosia starting to make sense? By the way, it's not a degrading term. It's not. Believe me, it's not. And it's so important to understand it. But I should probably stop talking about it because I'm not going to go into depth into what it is anytime soon. Um, but it's like wow, honestly. So this was taken from a Tumblr user called His Heart Hymns. Um, so in this video, an American general explains how politicians at the Pentagon made decisions to invade 7 countries: Iraq, Syria, Libya, Afghanistan, Somalia, Sudan, and Iran, which oil-rich countries, within a 5-year span without any reasons. When the military questioned their motives, their response was, "We have a strong military, so we can overthrow governments." This 1 minute video is enough to expose how America, Europe, and Israel, the so called bastion of freedom and human rights, destroy nations to fulfill their evil imperialistic goals. The audience is laughing while he proudly talks about the genocides that America and its allies have committed. Millions of people died, and millions more are facing poverty, starvation, and homelessness, even to this day, but at least they got a good laugh out of it.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld, and one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, No. He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." I said, "We're going to war with Iraq? Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we got a good military and we can take down governments." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, "I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran." I said, "Is it classified?" He said, "Yes, sir." I said, "Well, don't show it to."
Like, let's move on. All right, so here's some tweets coming out of Palestine. But this was, like I said, I told you I was working on this since April and May, right? So this tweet is from April 13th, and then this is from May 11th, right? Mohammed Shahada. Famished Gazans have been eating animal feed to survive, so Israel decided to ban animal feed as well. The depravity is unfathomable. Look at this. Okay, let's just take a look at this real quick. So here's a list of items United Nations and other aid agencies say Israeli authorities have blocked from entering Gaza at least once since October 7th. Anesthetics, animal feed, cardiac catheters, chemical water quality testing kits, chocolate croissants, crutches, field hospital boxes, flak jackets and helmets for aid workers, fittings for water pipeline repair, generators for hospitals, green tents and sleeping bags, maternity kits, medical thread and reproduction health kits. Like, human rights though, right? Human rights, and not only human rights, but, you know, Biden has gone on record on multiple occasions saying that they will support Israel no matter what. And I want to talk about what is barbaric and what isn't barbaric, and, you know, who has any right to have any sort of moral, like, this is so. Anyway, the rest of the items banned or restricted from entering Gaza by Israel is even more insane. It includes chocolate pastries, children's toys, stone fruits, examples, dates, mangoes, peaches, cherries, apricots. You know why? Because you can plant stone fruits rather easily. And water purification tools. Engineered famine. Right? Solar panels, solar-powered lamps and flashlights, solar-powered medical refrigerators. Satellite communication kits, like, which is why eSIMs are so huge. This is what I was saying. Like, when people were trying to raise funds and stuff for Palestinians, I personally, like, if I were in the position to donate, I would have focused entirely on eSIMs and like evacuation funds, because donations to like food organizations, as much as it's so easy to think, oh, at least they'll get to eat, this is the reality here, right? Eye on Palestine. An Omani doctor, Oman is a country, by the way, doctor present in the Gaza Strip wrote, due to severe hunger, lack of supplies, and the disappointment of the surrounding countries, right? Because the surrounding countries are, I believe they're charging exorbitant fees to Palestinians in order to let them enter the country, which is obviously, I mean, they can't pay those fees, which is why I was saying escape funds and eSIMs, I think, are the most constructive way that you can donate um, to Palestine if you're in the position. But anyway, children swallowed batteries and coins thinking they were candy. Here is the extraction of a battery that a child swallowed in Gaza. Look at the size of that, bro. Like, that can't be. Like, there is no way. Like, there is no way. It's a miracle that child is alive. It's a miracle that child is alive. That, just even looking at that on this, that is the size. How is that child breathing? Literally lucky that it's not flipped horizontally and blocking the entire airway. I don't even. Oh my God. Oh my God. Anyway, now, section 2, humanity, right? We're going through this list here, right? So we've done food. Humanity's next. Where were we? Okay, humanity. Cool. All right, let's talk about the International Labor Organization. Remember, again, this is all to illustrate that what we are one connected, unified force, and the construct of country is a farce. To advance social and economic justice by setting international labor standards. Did you know that? Did you know that? International labor standards, in which everybody, international, yeah, yeah. So aimed at ensuring accessible, productive, sustainable work worldwide in conditions of freedom, equity, security, and dignity as a response to maintaining world peace after World War One. This is so funny to me for a myriad of reasons. We've already talked about the centralization of Europe and in the narrative of the world. Um, and, you know, how these organizations here um, are connected and tied to and have their allegiance and foundation in the imperial core, and how destabilization of the imperial core is due to the fact that socialism does not exist in these countries. Um, and it's just really funny to see, like, how it's all connected. The conditions are predating and surrounding World War One, and our allegiance to the monetary token, and our allegiance to the construct of country and sovereignty, and all these shits, just like, anyway. Let's talk about it though. The Gilded Age, 1870s to the 1900s, right? This was in the United States of America when you got the huge industrialists, like we're talking about like the massive railroads and fucking, like the big bankers and, ostentatious wealth, no labor laws, children were working, there was no such thing as a weekend, like, LOL. Anyway, this was mirrored in Europe through 1871 to 1914, an age of imperialism, shaped by new kinds of political debate, and the pressures that culminated in war. right? Imperialism, uh, what were the effects of that? How were the spoils of that socialized or not socialized? What were the things, the new constructs, the new issues that were cropping up because of all of the pillaging and subjugation and people wanting a piece of this pie and that pie, and there was so much power that people were trying to vie for and steal from other people, including kinfolk or whatever have you. And it just complete debauchery, right? World War One culminated in that, 1914 to 1918. Then following, oh, excuse you, then following that, right, the Great Depression, 1929 to 1941, worldwide gross domestic product to GDP fell by an estimated 15%. By comparison, worldwide GDP fell by less than 1% from 2008 to 2009 during the Great Recession. International trade fell by more than 50%. Unemployment in the US rose to 23%, and in some countries rose as high as 33%. Unrest was able to be capitalized by independent actors that accumulated in war again. So this happened twice back to back. Back to back and a face to face. Side to side and side to side. Shake your partner's hand and do it again. Like, this is so. Like, this is ugly. This is very ugly. It's giving. I have this thing where I get older but just never wiser. Midnights become my afternoons. When my depression hits the graveyard shift. That is probably the most I know of that song. All of the people I've ghosted stand there in the room. You have to face your demons sooner or later. You have to face your repercussions. You cannot outrun yourself by, infinite growth. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Which is why I find it so delicious that so many industries and so many monopolies are finding it really hard to never mind maintain profits, um or rather to say never mind expand profits, but even maintain profits. Like, everybody's taking major losses, and it's good. Listen, like, this is so. How many times do we have to do this until we get it? How many times? 1700s, it is now 2024. Let's take a look at these notes I wrote here. Notice by 1920, the ILO, founded in 1919, there was already a breaking push into stage three, but holding on to stage two brought neoliberalism, and life's conditions are completely unlivable. Notice how? Neoliberalism, our bestie. Neoliberal capitalism. Well, liberal capitalism and then neoliberal capitalism, right? Pre and post World War II, or maybe World War One and World. Look, this time period here, 1914 to 1945, is only what, 30 years max, bro. I'm not even 30 yet. Like, can we? Like, it's difficult. It's difficult to even properly conceptualize exactly how short a time period, or how long, or how long in context to things. Like, it's just, can we be serious? Can we be serious? Anyway, what saved the imperial core from experiencing the immediate consequences of this decision, right? The immediate consequences of neoliberalism, right? The construct of bringing capitalism back to the forefront, um, you know, exponential profits and blah, 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 was immigration. By the time neoliberalism had completely replaced the resulting socialist political inclinations from the cumulative effect of the Gilded Age, World War One, the Great Depression, and World War Two. So neoliberal capitalism, my goodness, it was very easy for people to not recognize how shitty neoliberal capitalism, just like regular old capitalism, sucked because the worst of it came to people who were new to the country, right? Migrants always get the worst of it, whilst also being blamed for the destabilization that the ruling powers cause because they don't want to socialize anything, right? Only their friends get to line their pockets, and they have a stake in those companies that can be publicly traded, like, this is so ghetto. Anyway, and see how that's compromising the validity of labor as a system, and therefore rendering the ILO useless in helping to maintain social order predicted on welfare of the human species. If social order is predicated on the welfare of human species, labor as a construct cannot exist. Labor as a construct cannot exist. The idea that we as human beings sell our bodies, our times, our mind, our expertise to overlords who do not pay us our value on purpose. That's not, they're not, their purpose is not to compensate you fairly for your contributions. And you don't even see the results of your contributions either. Oftentimes, you're not really creating things that are not just fulfilling to you, but also that are aligned to your natural talent and inclinations. Like, it's just like, it's really, you're just a cog. You're just a resource. Like, the institution of labor is directly tied to an extension of stage 2, which we have already from time been growing out of, but we have a stubborn reluctance to let go of what we were supposed to let go of, what we're not supposed to take with us as we continue to evolve. Because it's not like we're hopping from one thing to another. Each stage, we refine skill sets and we acquire things that allow us to live at a higher echelon, and so on and so forth. Yeah, and I wrote a little aside here on UN Habitat, a program for human settlements and sustainable urban development. And it's like, but it's not though. Because we even see that housing isn't even a human right. It's not recognized as a human right. Why the hell is housing an industry? Why? Sustainable urban development is crazy. That's just crazy. But it is interesting you think about it though. Roads, the reason why we have roads was to shuffle people to and from, their wage factory and back. That's it. It wasn't because, humans might want to explore places, or, humans might want to see each other. No, because if that were the case, there are a lot of things actually that would probably be constructed differently if they had different incentives. But everything that exists is because it was turned into an industry. Everything that exists the way it is now was because it was turned into an industry. And if it wasn't, our world would look very different. The way in which we handle our resources, distribute our resources, and I even wonder if the aesthetic of the world we live in would look different. Because everything that we do right now, because of the system, the monetary market system we've constructed, everything is about cutting costs, right? Like, why the hell are you driving a car right now that has no buttons whatsoever and just a touch screen? Like, that's insanity. And they want to talk about innovation. No, it's because it's cheaper to make. When I look at the world, that's what I see. Next, we were talking about human rights, right? The United Nations Human Rights Council, UNHRC, to promote and protect human rights around the world. Now, the council investigates allegations of breaches of human rights in United Nations member states and addresses thematic human rights issues like freedom of association and assembly, freedom of expression, freedom of belief in religion, women's rights, LGBT rights, and the rights of racial and ethnic minorities. Um, yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. Okay, so a debrief on what human rights is as its like textbook definition. Human rights are moral principles. Sorry, I forgot. I need to follow with my mic. Human rights, mouse, I mean, human rights are moral principles or norms for certain standards of human behavior and are regularly protected as substantive rights in substantive law, municipal and international law. They are commonly understood as inalienable fundamental rights to which a person is inherently entitled simply because she, or he is a human being, and which are inherent in all human beings, regardless of their age, ethnic origin, location, language, religion, ethnicity, or any other statues. Which is interesting, right? Because it brings back to this concept of we are one people. We are one people with one long, convoluted, interconnected history. Right? It's this basis of because we're all here, because we're all human. They are applicable everywhere and at every time in the sense of being universal, and they are egalitarian in the sense of being the same for everyone because we are all human. You getting it? Okay. They are regarded as requiring empathy and the rule of law and imposing an obligation on persons to respect the human rights of others. It is generally considered that they should not be taken away except as a result of due process based on specific circumstances. Well, imagine championing to take away the human rights of someone, which is crazy, right? Like, I actually think this might even I think that we aren't absolutist enough about human rights. I'm not gonna lie. If the absolutist take is people to respect the human rights of others, it's funny. I looked up at the belief in religion and automatically think of evangelical types. Like, there's no need to convert. Like, there's no need to try and convert people. There's no need for this is actually going into a completely different territory. We're not even gonna go there. Like, this is anyway. Um, all right. The formation of this council is perhaps the most stage 3 out of all the organizations in this bracket, addressing us collectively as a species, as I said, and what we understand about ourselves, and therefore what the experience of a human being should be like. Part of the reason why I've titled stage 3 the reassessment stage, done through thematic human rights issues like freedom of association and assembly, etc., etc., and the rights of blah blah blah. So it's like we are conceptualizing what the experience of a human being should be like equally on the basis of the fact that we are all human, right? And that is expressed categorically through these sections that we, I guess, have all come to become familiar with in one way, shape, or form, right? Association and assembly, freedom of expression, belief in religion, women's rights, and LGBT rights, and racial and ethnic minorities. Yeah. Um, because again, this is the idea that no one person or party should be able to subjugate and exploit another person or party. Like, it's that simple, right? It's that simple. Why? Why is that though? Because it encroaches on a human's ludic agency, which is very important. Again, these are all constructs and concepts that we will discuss in due time. But you're starting to see now why it took me so long to put this all together, and why part of the reason why it took me so long was because I had to cut so many things out. Because I just look, time and place, right? Anyway, so as I said, look, I just said ludic autonomy. It's almost like I know what I'm talking about. I I literally wrote this. Okay, it's clear that there's an emphasis on the ludic autonomy of human beings, that there are things to recognize and advocate for that complete the picture that humans aren't just human capital stock, cogs to fit into a machine, and that ludic autonomy cannot be whittled away to create a less conscious, truly passive, programmable specimen. Can we talk about that? That is what subjugation really is, right? To whittle away the ludic autonomy of a human being to turn them into a machine, right? A less conscious, truly passive, programmable specimen, right? That's what subordination is, right? You do what I tell you to do. You do not have any autonomy. You do not have any thought. You are essentially just a punching bag to my will. I want to tell you to do this, and this because I'm a dictator and a loser. Like, okay, weirdo. That ultimately humans are going to fight for what they want. They have desires. That humans are going to express those desires through opinions, whether that be academically or artistically, right? Expression, freedom of expression, right? Humans are going to fight for what they want, right? Because humans have desires. We are not truly passive, programmable specimens. We have desires. Oh, we could talk about marketing because that is an aside. We could talk about marketing. I won't insert that here, but there is so much we still need to get through. Oh my God. But it will come full circle. Um, right, that humans are going to express those desires through opinions, whether that be academically or artistically. That humans are going to believe in what they believe, ascribing meanings to life and its articles to make sense of the world. And right? Let's talk about that as well. Humans are going to believe in what they believe in, ascribing meanings to life and its articles to make sense of the world. This is why the construct of spirituality is something that will never be removed from humanity. While, yes, I do believe that there are three stages to spirituality: spirituality outside of a religious construct, spirituality within a religious construct, so doctrine that most likely has been manipulated through the passage of time, specifically due to the fact that it is another form to be able to keep people's allegiance to a particular ruling power or state, etc., etc. Ooh, ooh. And within religious organizations, there's a third level, which is cults, right? People who assign themselves as leaders or prophets within an organized religion that other people are supposed to follow and do their bidding. But we know why cults are dangerous, and we also know why, moving a step up when it comes to religions, why people have such huge resentments towards these old, powers and the way that religion centralizes certain groups of people, and you are supposed to move your own culture and origin and historical context and history and culture from that, right? You're almost supposed to be two people, and in your mind you're supposed to know that this specific group of people will always be above you, right? Religion, and then above that, spirituality, free from all of that, right? Regardless, humans are going to always believe in humans are going to believe in what they believe, right? They're going to continue to ascribe meanings to life, which is why things like astrology, numerology, tarot, other divinatory tools, all that, to me, like, I'm not sure why you know I mean, I'm just gonna say I'm not sure why people are weird about that, but people are weird about everything because people are confused about everything. I'm gonna be honest with you. I mean, I think it's kind of making sense now as we're only talking about this in a very surface level, but like, let's be real. Okay. um and that any form of subjugation that stripes a human to be able to enact on their hmm? Oh, and that any form of subjugation that strips a human to be able to enact on their ludic autonomy, women under patriarchy, rainbow folk under heteronormativity, religious backed or otherwise, and the global non white population under the systems of white supremacy upheld by the imperial core, both within the countries where they are the majority and throughout the world. Because remember this, even in countries where non white people are the minority, Because of the influence of the imperial core, they will not be treated as such. They will not be treated in the same way that ethnic minorities of other origins are treated in countries where the population is majority white. But anyway, um, right? Any of these forms of subjugations that strips a human to enact with their ludic autonomy, right, will be met by blowback and contention because our ludic autonomy is forcing us to fight for the equilibrium movement. Now, the concept of ludic autonomy will be explored in episode 2 of the Hominid Development series in further detail. So, like I said, I had to keep some things, remove some things. But the equilibrium movement, ooh, a new concept, a new construct. What is that? So, from stage, right now we're between stage 2 and stage 3, right? Stage 5 is what I actually call the ludic stage. So, our movement towards stage 5, which is an equilibrium, right? It means that our ludic essence is recognized and our systems around us are supportive and constructive and are built for our ludic natures. Or I should say our ludic nature, supporting of our ludic autonomy, democratic anarchy, which is also another thing that I do not think I go into detail here. It might be in episode 2, or it might just be separate, just like Anglo-Psychosia. But stage 3, reassessment stage, like, bruh. The reality is, each time our ludic autonomy is subjugated by our true inability to recognize that we as a species are completely unhinged by the fact that we have allowed ourselves to mutate into whatever the hell this is, in which we're living amongst filth. Like, both literally and theoretically. Because we don't clean up after ourselves, literally and theoretically. We are not cleaning our internal lives, our internal worlds. We're not calibrating our mental acuity, particularly in terms of our responsibility of our agency and our consciousness, etc., etc. And then literally by, being completely irresponsible with how we use the resources that surround us. Like, it's just, I keep saying this, it's so ghetto, bro. Like, humanity, and it's just like the arrogance is kind of astounding, because like we will really get on a podium and talk about like, oh, humanity is at the top of the food chain, oh, humanity is so evolved and we're such an intelligent species, and we have all these awards and shit that we give to people who are just like, it's just so like, this is so embarrassing. It's so embarrassing, honestly. Everything that we do so far, every award right now, I'm just kind of, it's, to me, it's like equivalent of participation trophies. It's like, oh, like baby's first steps. Like, it's so, anyway. So, like I said, the refusal to move from stage 2 to stage 3 has created all the organizations in the humanities section, which has in turn created an entire section dedicated to development. And birthed collectivist initiatives through UNESCO to get us looking beyond the concept of creed, a key aspect, an ethos shift of stage 2 into stage 3. Like I said, right? UNESCO, as we know, is the heritage thing, right? It's like trying to get people to view each other in a more compassionate light by sharing aspects of culture with one another, and trying to I guess view the beauty in other people, which is so crazy to me that we can't inherently do that because of what's been taught to us. Like, that is so sad. But anyway, here we are, UNESCO and the equilibrium movement, right? The United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, right? Aim of promoting world peace and security through international cooperation in education, arts, sciences, and culture. right? So, time to finally talk about the two stages that we have been talking about for the past 2.5 hours here. This right here is stage two, and this right here is stage three, the possession stage and the assessment stage. So, this is a key part of how I constructed the hominid development theory, right? You recognize patterns on a micro scale that play out on the macro, right? So, in order to understand collectively humanity, the collective large patterns that, may be influencing us on our evolutionary journey, we should look at how an individual human being evolves, right? So, acclimation, right? This is what I call the stage. Acclimation, stage ages 2 to 4, right? So, think about it, right? Humanity right now, we are in 2024, and I guess, is it the calendar that we use? Is it the Gregorian calendar? Um, I would look that up, but listen, man, I kind of want this to be over. I've been talking. Think about it. Collectively, our species right now is caught between ages 2 to 4 and 4 to 6. Think about a 2 and a 4 year old, and think about a 4 and a 6 year old. Now are you starting to get it? Okay. So, acclimation. Here one flirts with their first taste of autonomy, understanding the physicalities of this existence through sensory exploration and exercising newfound talents that continue to develop with trial and error, such as walking and running. One claims territory and plays alongside others without involving them in a phenomenon known as parallel play. Does that sound familiar? These territories are defended even to their detriment, and one has to learn the boundaries and responsibilities of their capabilities. Items are easily identifiable at this stage and manipulated at one's will. The possession stage, right? This is the macro stage and the macro equivalent. The possession stage, humanity on a large scale. Understanding what we have at our disposal by studying resources and encouraging manipulation for optimization, initiating innovation, right? Industrialization, resources to products, to actual goods. I don't want to say products, but resources into actual items that can be properly used. In the process of understanding what we have at our disposal, we divide the population into groups certified by bodies, crowned as territories, and assign autonomous governing bodies to orchestrate parallel societies. Societies with differing characters and varying levels of privilege that pit these formulated groups against one another. Look at that. Look at that. Now, advancements so far that have emerged from the possession stage: agriculture, medicine, energy, currency, governmental systems, mineral materials, educational and theoretical systems, machinery, and communications technology. Because why? Understanding what we have at our disposal by studying resources and encouraging manipulation for optimization. So, there's that, right? So, this is what we are holding on to, right? This parallel play, parallel societies, all this, like, just, continuing to try and find new ways to do, I say business, but it's not really business. It's like, well, I guess you could say business, but like, bro, what is considered business is messy, to say the least. Anyway, current position, incoming transition, right? So this is where we are, where we're holding on to, and what we are forcibly trying to move toward, and what our new, I guess, developments that are hindered by the fact that they cannot create profit are usually in this section here. But they may also, or rather, they're probably more so suited to stage 4. But we're skipping a step. We're skipping a step, and until we really properly, delve into stage 3, stage 4 and any aspect to try and move towards it won't be stage 4 because you're holding on to stage 2. So I mean, it's a mess. All right, let's talk about here. Education, age 4 to 6. Here, one is sent into a new environment to further develop and learn how to interact with other people who are not connected to one's immediate family. Are you seeing this already? Okay. How to process the injection of preliminary ideas and broadening one's perspective to understand that one is a part of a great world, a larger picture, and must learn to shift their perspective in order to properly navigate reality and learn to be a cooperational member of this larger picture. One of the biggest things in this age group we know is trying to get kids to play with each other, conflict solve, simulating apologies for this age group is like the number one thing you're constantly doing. Oh, say sorry to each other, say sorry, like you didn't mean to that. Compromise, you get this for a little bit of time and then you'll get this for a little bit of time, etc., etc., right? Macroequivalent, the assessment stage, sorting through all the data we have been exposed to through the millennia of our existence and experience, and as a result, re-educating the species, building new, accurate, and solid psychological foundations that correct our collective perspective on what's the most apt way to ensure not just our collective survival, but our collective prosperity. Collective advancements will surround the demolition of the continental ego, right? The idea of a sovereign nation that, you know, that whose simple mere existence justifies the war waged on anyone who's not inside the borders. Like, it's just like, what's happening? um to recognize the species as one people with one intricate and complex history, inducing an unprecedented age of open collaboration, resulting in the erasure of borders and governmental powers, and the optimization of technology to eliminate currency and distribute resources to all objectively equally. Part of this here, remember how I was talking about pardoning, apologizing? Anglo-psychosia plays a part in this, which we will not talk about in this episode. Um, Anglo-psychosia, as well as I definitely think we need to have a collective conversation of just apologizing to each other. Just apologizing for this, that, and the third, and like, like this was wrong, this is whatever, like this is how what we should have done, this is like this. Ideally, in my head, there's a huge summit like this. It's live streamed everywhere, and the entire time, just apologies, back and forth, just apologies. Healing. Okay. Now we're just gonna do development at a glance. So section 3, development at a glance. So these are the 3 of the intergovernmental bodies that I classified as falling under development. So you have the United Nations Capital Development Fund, the UNCDF, offers last mile finance models that unlock public and private resources, especially at the domestic level, to reduce poverty and support local economic development. This last mile is where available resources for development are scarcest, where market failures are most pronounced, and where benefits from national growth tend to leave people excluded. I mean, remember how I was saying here, like, that literally the refusal to move from stage 2 to stage 3 has created all of the organizations in the humanities section, which has in turn created an entire section dedicated to development because of the mutation and the I said deportation, I'm tired, and deformity of society due to this. Okay, the United Nations Development Program, UNDP, helping countries eliminate poverty and achieving sustainable economic growth and human development. Like, now you're starting to get that as I'm reading these out, like you just have to roll your eyes. Like, is it making sense now? Like, there was no solution to this but to leave stage 2 behind. It's that simple. All of this is wasted effort and eating at time that we do not have, right? The climate clock is ticking, the climate clock. Um, and we can only stave off so many economic downturns. Like, I'm serious. Like, people are, there's about to be next world war. Like, I'm not gonna lie to you. Let us not forget a couple slides back, this period right here. We're in this again, by the way. Like, anyway, let's continue. Um, the UNDP emphasizes developing local capacity towards long-term self-sufficiency and prosperity. The UNDP is funded entirely by voluntary contributions from UN member states. Voluntary contributions by UN member states. UN, which has its headquarters in one of the four sovereign nations, the United States, who is an imperial power all in itself, and member states who have vested interest in continuing to pillage and to continue to be imperial forces in the world. It's funny. The United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, promote and accelerate the industrialization of developing countries, which were emerging from decolonization in record numbers and with little to no industrial base. Since its founding, the organization has restructured and reformed several times. Isn't that kind of funny? The organization that was meant to be a sorry to colonized nations, because the entire point of colonization is to remove the agency of the native people, to make sure that they cannot build a life for themselves, to make sure that they cannot build a sovereign nation for themselves. And this was the organization under the imperial core that has since restructured and reformed several times. While the world continues to hold on to stage 2 and refuse to move on to stage 3. And look what it changed to. This is what's so sustainable development goals. Safeguarding the environment. Inclusive and sustainable industrial development. The countries that are trying to come up now have to be even more responsible than the people and the nations that did the damage. All while contending with the fact that no initiative will be successful under the monetary market system, because the monetary market system is inherently exploitative for the sake of capital. Logistic networks. Section 4, logistic networks. Cute little picture, right? Little. Anyway. All right. This is a cute little steamboat. A coal. No, steamboat. I think that's steam. That is definitely coal. Yummy black smoke. All right, we've already been telecommunicating and coordinating our communications globally since the late 19th century, the 1800s, led by Europe, who was playing in real time elements of the natural evolution that makes the transition between stage 2 and stage 3, accumulation and then reassessment. But again, like I said, it's not like Europe is in stage 3 while the rest is in stage 2. That's not at all what it is, because in order for it to be an actual stage, the entire collective has to be involved. And there's no way, if you're one of those people who thinks that one section of the globe can continue to evolve, it's not evolution, because in order to continue forward, you still need the resources that you're still stealing and infringing human rights atrocities, or infringing on human rights to commit human rights atrocities, in the name of your progress, which isn't progress because you're just repeating the same cycles. Hence, not participating in actual objective stage 3 transition because it was for the purpose of preventing the entire species collective advancement forward. That's the whole point of the process of conquest. You cannot say that you are a shining example of what it means to evolve when all you're doing is conquest. Your way of evolving is just subjugating and preventing other people, other aspects of our species, our collective, preventing them from moving forward. That's what conquest is. That's not evolution. It's not enlightenment. It's not spirituality. It's not morality. It's nothing. It's diabolicalism. Some of you, that's your religion. Some of you. Hey, I mean, I guess there's room for all of us, huh? Let's illustrate how late we are to the stage 3 transition. We've already spoken about, our first shots really were the 1700s of understanding, oh, yeah. But this is really depressing, right? When we started creating actual bodies to help facilitate aspects of stage 3, but, could not remove ourselves from our allegiance to stage 2, which again has brought about this mutation. So the International Telecommunications Union, right, was initially aimed at helping people helping connect telegraphic networks between countries, with its mandate consistently broadening with the advent of new communications technologies. Founded May 17th, 1865. We are in 2024. Universal Post Union, right, coordinates postal policies among member nations and facilitates a uniform worldwide postal system. See, these are things we don't think about. Telecommunications, postals, international aviation, right? Intellectual property. Like, look at, founded 9th of October, 1874. Universal Postal Union, October 9th, 1874. Right? The advent of planes, obviously, this was the 1940s, right? Coordinates the principles and techniques of international air navigation and fosters the planning and development of international air transport to ensure safety and orderly growth. The 4th of April, 1947. And then Intellectual Property Organization. I believe this was alongside the advent of the television, I believe. Or maybe it might have been a little bit after. It might have been when television went mainstream, because I think television existed before this. Must have. What am I talking about? When did television become popular? Yeah, the 1950s. That's what I meant. So after the 1950s, right, you had to have people, stealing your IP for 10 years before people were like, or maybe close to 20 actually, before people were like, hey, 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 hey. And music, right? Popular music also around this time as well. The advent of creativity being a huge part of the collective consciousness, collectively, right? Worldwide syndication, worldwide distribution. That had to be checked. It had to start, and that became the 14th of July, 1967. A couple months before my mother was born. Okay. Humans' identity crisis. The fallacy of passport, right? Let's talk about it. Basis for discrimination, justice against wars, nationalism, and narrative function of removing humanity from a person. That's all it exists to do, right? I am entitled to this thing because I hold this passport. You are not entitled to this thing because you do not hold this passport. Full stop. Goodbye. That's it. That's it. And the things that we justify that we're entitled to or not entitled to are really skewed and crazy, right? Like, oh, like we're entitled to a fair trial, or we're entitled to empathy or humanity, or oh, we're entitled to aid, or oh, we're entitled to this, that, and the other. Like, Okay. And then, right, resource distribution, which we talked about. And, not in depth because that's going to be for next episode, but nationalism breeding exploitation, pillaging to create a rudimentary construct of economy, right? Rudimentary. I think I might touch on this in some of the later slides here. Um, but we will talk about the construct of economy, especially in episode 2. Um, Yeah, mess. All right. Hoarding waste, artificial scarcity to continue the deficit economy in the form of capitalism. Yes. Hoarding waste and artificial scarcity. Everyone's hungry. We've already explained why. We've already explained why. Everyone's hungry. Everyone's poor. We've already explained why. Um, and then the recognition of the whole, right? All of these are remnants of a primitive function, and why, as as ludic beings, there will never be any solution to problems that are caused by these layout systems than to leave the system behind. It's that simple. The system is broken and must be fixed. The system is working exactly as intended and must be destroyed. It's that simple. The system that exists now was for the optimization of our being within stage 2, which was necessary for us at the time. But we've long since outgrown stage 2, which is why our society is so messed up. Our society is messed up, our planet is messed up, our politics is messed up, everything is messed up. And why everyone is so confused and scared, and everything is predicated on fear and being in survival mode, and everyone is hungry and everyone is poor and there's war everywhere and everything is dirty. It's just ew. Okay, next. Barriers to true global facilitation. This is an excerpt from Ludicism and the Global Paradigm, which I've already outlined to you. Oops. Let me just do this. Okay, yeah. Here on my Substack, Ludicism and the current global paradigm. The Substack is noted here. Sarah Poi, the Ludicist. Right? Fantastic. Okay, back to this monstrosity. Okay. So this is an excerpt from Ludicism and the current global paradigm. Oh my goodness. We're reaching the final stretch here now. And so it should seem obvious that humans have also seen benefic changes over the millennia. Humanity is objectively in its most advantageous stage in all of human history, having not only sequestered itself from physical dangers its ancestors had to face in the wild, but also having a full understanding of the physical materials available to sustain its existence on the planet. Now, this is different from understanding how every single physical material can be manipulated for the sake of things that are beyond what we immediately need, if that makes sense. That's more closely aligned to stage 6 of the Hominid development theory, which, if you want to know what that is, you can read Ludicism in the Current Global Paradigm on my Substack. But again, we will also dedicate an episode to stage 6. I can't remember which episode it is because I'm, as you can tell, I'm kind of going in an order that's different from the actual stage sequence. Anyway. Right. And the Homo sapien, the current iteration of our species, has been able to prevail because of the mental and physical evolutionary leaps it's been able to make over the 2 million years the hominid has been on Earth. As noted, many of our own conclusions of things that happen on the macro scale are first sourced and tested on the micro. And so it should not be of any surprise that the nurturement of our species as a collective is reflected on the individual level. And it is looking at the development of the singular human that we can better understand the stages in which the hominid as a collective must learn to navigate to develop properly. From birth to 3 months, children become aware of their surroundings and the parts of themselves that allow them to be aware of their surroundings, tracking people and objects with their eyes, reaching, discovering their hands and feet, and lifting and turning their heads towards sound. They're also aware of the other beings that they share this strange reality with, preferring to see faces, linking faces to be attended to, and therefore satiating a need for sociability, which creates trust. These core attributes are built upon predominantly until 12 months. In this first stage, the child is the most vulnerable it will ever be to the world around it, needing protection from physical danger, adequate nutrition, adequate health care, motor and sensory stimulation, appropriate language stimulation, and responsive, sensitive parenting. Starting from the age of 1, children are confident enough with their navigation of the world that they begin a claim of independence, experimenting with objects to fulfill their curiosity, shown through enjoying stories and understanding words and ideas. Through this assertion of independence, they can recognize the ownership of objects, develop friendships, solve problems, and show pride in accomplishment. Despite this attitude of conquest and adventure, however, um, they prefer familiar people and will not stray too far from the people they have grown to trust. In the second stage, while the needs of the first stage are still in effect, children in this stage require support in acquiring motor, language, and thinking skills, opportunity for play and exploration, play with other children, and most importantly, learning self-control. From 2 onward, children learn knowledge and new skills, which, when paired with their enlarging attention span, endows them with a larger bank, which by the time they reach age 5 will allow them to ask many questions, desire things that are seen as beyond their current capability and stature in society, and they test their skills with caution. Children require the opportunity to not only develop their skills on the previous stages, but to learn cooperation by helping and sharing. From 5 onward, this is paired with the need to engage in problem solving, teamwork, questioning and observing, and developing a sense of personal competency by acquiring basic life skills and attending basic education. In this third stage, children are curious about people and how the world works, show an increased interest in the details of information, and become more interested in the final product or outcome of a situation. From what we can glean from the developmental stages of the hominid on the micro scale, in the larger sense or the macro scale, our species is about to petition itself to cross the threshold of the second stage into the third stage, where we assess the skills we have acquired during our time as a species on this planet and share information openly and honestly. Truly globalized collective teamwork to derail the concept of individual conquest by any one government or state or crown, and thresh out the ideologies that are not conducive to collective prosperity, therefore gaining a sense of true competency for our species. For all the time one could spend drawing out the history of society, these are the main components that make up the cycle we are repeating. A new resource is discovered that becomes of utmost importance for commerce. People travel far and wide because of what this resource provides, which encourages the globalization possible of that era. Empires and ruling bodies, with their own individual agendas, separate from both opposing empires and the citizens it rules over, create great arbitrary conflicts over the resources, which involve using its citizens to fight on behalf of this agenda, and the mismanagement of the resources brings about some sort of desertion in which the people can no longer be provided for, creating desolate conditions of famine, drought, disease, and ultimately death. Our current society is no different to any society before it, and in fact, we have more to worry about. Having made all the discoveries, advancements, and globalization to do away with the concept of individualized governing bodies, all with differing agendas, we have outgrown the types of conflicts we keep having, and the way we also handle conflict itself. A war now, in our current maturation, would end all life on this planet, much like growing out of childhood, where dismissible scuffles turn into punishable assaults with grave consequences. The tensions, forces, and ploys to take countries over, To have a global superpower at the expense of others would be to fail in crossing into what is clearly the next phase of our species' development, and would serve no other purpose than avenging pettiness. No one country's facade of doing anything to provide for the people under their rulership trumps the objective truth that everyone on Earth is to be provided for, in the same way every other species on Earth is provided for without the parameters of borders, and therefore taking what they need and leaving the rest as it will always be there. Now, this is an important excerpt that I decided to include here because although we've already talked about how intertwined and interconnected we already are, and why holding onto the construct and concept of country and sovereignty is detrimental to our evolution. It's important to understand that it's important to understand where we are. To understand where we are in our maturation process, and therefore how we are allowed to conduct ourselves if our goal is to be successfully cooperative with one another. Successfully cooperative with one another and live fulfilling lives whilst doing so. And at some point, I think we need to ask ourselves, do we want fulfilling lives? Do we want fulfilling lives? Because the way that everything is constructed and our allegiance to those constructions and systems answers the question for us, and that answer is no. If you want a fulfilling life, an egalitarian existence amongst your peers, your global community, there is only one way forward. And every species has to learn this lesson. Every species. And even within ourselves, our own individual species, as we grow and mature individually as an actual person, we call antisocial behavior disorderly. It is a moniker, an aspect, an attribute to mental illness diagnoses. Antisocial behavior, the inability to get along with people. You are considered a threat to society in varying degrees depending on what the diagnosis ends up being. So think about that on a global scale now. Us as a species as a whole. Why are we encouraging this antisocial, segregated behavior when in every aspect we are connected? And I'm not just talking about that like metaphysically, like literally, as we've been going over this document here, in modern recent history, since at least the 1700s, right? We're not talking about, if there's any possibility that humanity might have existed in a different way millennia and millennia and ages and ages and ages and ages ago, before our time even here, before our bipedal ancestors raised themselves from the ground or whatever, like whoever might have inhabited Earth before us. Like, I'm not even talking about that. Like this is like really. All right. Now, what is a ludic being? Because I keep talking about ludicism and I keep telling you to read Ludicism and the Current Global Paradigm. What is a ludic being? Now, this is also an excerpt from Ludicism and the Current Global Paradigm, right? Strap in, lock in. All right. With every decision, there is an inherent reaction, including the decision to not make one. Life, therefore, is meeting us, interacting with us, our movements creating ripples that react to our presence. When querying, then, about what drives the human to make the decisions it does, there is an interesting modality that uncovers itself: joy. But joy is too simple a term to encapsulate the contentment in a moment when all your immediate fears of survival are eliminated with the presence of ample food to enjoy. The hominid expressing itself creatively, or expressing its creativity with the delights of cuisine and delicacy. Too simple to encapsulate the contentment in the warmth, in the presence of a warm, resourceful home base, mirrored in your image, that grounds you with the safety to be, invite, and explore. And joy is far too simple a term to encapsulate the contentment in your ability to enjoy your passions without the looming threat of labor forcing you to sacrifice your entire being for a bleak existence with few prospects. This is an unprecedented, resounding contentment that leaves no room for any desire but the desire to give. Here exists the experience of pleasure through the freedom to enjoy, an existence reflecting the blatant truth that life is not about suffering, an existence characterized by the euphoria of enjoying, from joy being a liminal space that brings one to the next, the cost, right? The cost of something, into a state where the self's perception of the physical world is constructed with the building blocks of playfulness, excitement, and enlivenment. So, I want to talk about this for a minute. Actually, there's no point because I do think I get into this in the next part here. Um, these are the sole emotions that bring one into the present and returns feelings of love and acceptance from a person, much like flora dependent on atmosphere and more specifically, carbon dioxide to photosynthesize and in turn provides oxygen. So it's not taking from you. It is the excess that you give to the world because of your resounding contentment, because you're not selling yourself in every front, in every aspect of your life, in every aspect of your existence, in every aspect of your consciousness. And this subsequently answers the query on the fundamental reaction the presence of the hominid evokes within its place in the ecosystem when its psychological state is in a healthy temperament. This exchange is called play. In our current society, we are most familiar with the concept of play in reference to games, but play and games are not actually replacements for one another. Games are a way to explicitly elicit play, play being a separate state of being. Why do you think gaming addiction is such a real slippery slope that is so all consuming? And why, when it comes to gaming, what is one thing that people always say? It's a bit of a meme now, right? It's breaking my immersion. There are very few actually art forms that you engage with that you're thinking to yourself, this is breaking my immersion if someone interrupts you, right? It's because games are a way to elicit play, right? And play is a separate state of being, right? Think about it. There are no other ambitions in creating a game than to bring us in touch with our natural states of play. You are forced to submit entirely into a new world with a different set of rules, completely separate from the rules you must adhere to as an aligned member of your current society, and are to enact yourself completely at your own discretion with an objective in mind. Your own discretion. How is it that you are expressing yourself? How is it that you are being? Right? This is the truest sense of your core. The healthy psychological temperament that we're talking about here is that contentment, right? That contentment where nothing is lacking. And in games, nothing is lacking, right? You essentially get to simulate what it's like to be ludic in video games, where you can just be. You're playing. You are exchanging with life in a way that is true to you without any caveat. And by caveat, I mean selling yourself, right? The cost, the space that brings one to the next, the cost. You are not selling. It's not like you're selling yourself in order to earn a reward that is joyous, that you can then, I guess, interpret it as joy. It's not that. You're understanding the difference here? So, you are to enact yourself completely at your own discretion. We talked about this ludic autonomy. Again, we'll talk about this in episode 2. With an objective in mind. Your life is your life. Live your life as your life. Look, if everything was recognized as a human resource or a human right, right? Food is a human right, water is a human right, housing is a human right. And our systems were created to support our ludic essence, right? Our inherent essence. We talked about how every system that exists right now is forced to subjugate and strip humans of their ludic autonomy, right? To become passive, passive programmable specimens that have no desires and that have no, that cannot live their lives for themselves. They are owned by all these different entities. And their lives are completely at the whims of decisions made by people who, have one objective in mind, and that's to make more money. That's it. That's it. That's all it's always been. That's it. That's why I say that the world around us, right? Everything is industry, and a lot of what we see with our own eyes, quite literally, would look very different if the objective of creating them was for our ludic joy, our ludic enhancement, support, right? Supporting us ludically, rather than, cut costs here. We have to make sure that everybody needs to be able to get to this factory and whatever. And we need to, also, we should probably sell them these things, right? Because we can make a lot of money on this. So, like, we should sell them the transportation to use this particular road. But we won't pay for the road themselves. We'll get them to pay with their taxes. And, like, are you getting it? Everything. And in fact, the disappearance of the third place should have awakened this in us. Wait, hold on. So you just expect me to just live at home and at work and that's it? I have to pay to breathe? I have to rent my this square foot here where I have my feet on this private property that you will call the cops on to get me off if I'm here a little too long? Like, this is crazy. Hello? Anyway. You have the freedom and liberty. You have the resources. We're talking about games now, right? You have the freedom and liberty. You have the resources, and you simply exchange your actions with the environment to induce joy. Play. This is what literal life should be. Our systems that we create, this is what it should be. But as play is a state and is an all-encompassing interaction with life itself, there should be a distinction between playing or play that is a state causing action and simply living or existing, right? In our society, the pleasures and joys we obtain are linked to fear. So the joy we feel in obtaining material wealth and security isn't actually joy, it's relief. Remember how I said everything that we are completely passive to the world around us, completely passive, because that is how we're socialized to be. Not just socialized to be, but like, we're kind of sold into a system and we have to keep selling ourselves, and that's how we're told to live, right? So any little thing that we get, we mistake it as, oh my God, yes, I'm doing this right, this is exactly how it should be, whatever, and I'm willing to fight for the system now because, I got what I wanted eventually in the end. But that's not joy, it's relief, because you were in survival mode up until that point. And you still are, actually, because you're still, if if something happens in the world, God forbid, like, you're still vulnerable and no one's going to bail you out. I mean, unless you're a massive multinational conglomerate, like, um anyway, um yeah. Um so, let's talk about this. Um In our current society, the pleasures and joys we obtain are linked to fear. So the joy we feel in obtaining material wealth and security isn't actually joy, it's relief. What is therefore produced by this exchange is nothing. The reasoning for this is because we feel as though we've covered, right? We feel as though we've recovered something that was missing, right? It's a self contained cycle of taking. Because we constantly have to sell ourselves, we're almost like spiritually indebted. We are in a debt spiritually, like emotionally, psychologically. We're selling yourselves to this entity and this entity that wants every aspect of us, every aspect. And so when we finally get something, it's like, oh, this is mine. Like, this is, and you hold on to it and you will defend it for the rest of your life. And anybody who comes close, you will kill them. You will literally kill them. Right? So it creates this almost like, I can't give because the only way I can get is if I sell myself. That's it. That's it. I have nothing to give. I have nothing to give. Now, play, on the other hand, brings one into a space within themselves that inceptualizes the creative spark, heightened positive emotions that lend itself to love and acceptance, which further lends itself to giving and sharing. Now there is an exchange present, right? Think about it. Play, you're in your own. After I just spent the last 3 hours, maybe 4 now at this point, going off on the term sovereignty, but like your own personal sovereignty, right? Ludic autonomy, right? Getting to exist in an exchange with life where um you are creating in an exchange that is authentically at the behest of your sense of play, right? The intrinsic part of not just humans. We see play in many species. Um but the ability to partake in this, right? Leaves one with an excess of things that they can give. And it's not that it's something that one consciously thinks of. It's a natural exchange, right? As we talked about here, like flora dependent on atmosphere, and more specifically carbon dioxide to photosynthesize and in return provides oxygen. It's a byproduct. It's a byproduct. Um, Now there is an exchange present. Now that we have established what play is, we can define ludicism. Ludicism is the act of living one's life that is aligned to one's natural state of play. A ludic society would therefore be a society that is conducive to the hominid's natural state of play. The implications of this are far more complex than at first glance. One's first reaction to a ludic society might be that the hominid's sense of importance and impact would be greatly diminished, that we as a species would be devoid of any real purpose. But upon looking deeper, it is evident that this is simply not the case. Um, and I actually aligned that in the hominid development theory. Exactly, what are potential developments that could take place in every stage because we've allowed ourselves to be ludic. We have created a system for stage 2 and it was great for stage 2, and we took what we needed from stage 2 and began to continue evolving as all beings do. Stage 3 and up until stage 5 though, it's the recognition that having a ludic society and living in a ludic society as a ludic being is reaching our emotional baseline. It's reaching our collective baseline. That will be when we have graduated from the tutorial phase of humanity. Can you believe that? Think about it though. Until we can support our true essence collectively and systemically, we will always be a shell of ourselves, and the decisions we make will always reflect that internal deficit that is manifested collectively. And the discoveries that we will make in the future as we continue to evolve will pale the rest of the stuff in comparison. Obviously, all of it is great, just like no one will complain of the discovery of fire, right? No one will complain about that. And yet, all right, the final slide, right? The cost, the reward, right? All this to say, the human minds, these typos are cracking me up. All this to say is that the human mind's been co opted by a centuries long campaign to remove the integrity of reason and autonomy to create the best sheep slash consumer. Think about the amount of sacrifices we've made to our biology and psychology just for people, the miniature ruling class whose face has many variations and has had many variations over the years, who need to have us at any given time be the best exploits to line their pockets with the monetary token, therefore securing their livelihood and increasing their power over the masses. Think about that. Think about all the sacrifices we have made collectively to our biology and psychology just for this one thing. Just so a tiny ass ruling class can continue to line their pockets with the monetary token. That's it. That's all it comes down to. That's it. People with complexes, people with skewed narratives, who believe that human beings are not human beings, that human beings should be subjected to just a centuries long erosion of the spirit. Really. I mean, it's so primitive when you say it out loud. Long-term sacrifices we have made for the short-term gain of the select few on the entire globe. I mean, really. People live and die by this. The world is living and dying by this. The wars are living and dying by this. The cost of living is living and dying by this. The quality of life is living and dying by this. I mean, this is so ghetto. I keep saying that, like, who are we in our little stupid suits and our little stupid, little pins and crests and stupid little awards that we give annually? This is ghetto. Like, anyway, this is how we define success. This. And this is how we define our goals. And this is how we define our purpose. And this is how we define life and our experience on this planet. Long-term sacrifices. The amount. Biologically, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. I mean, there is a reason why generational trauma exists and why there's so many variations of it. And look, we are sick. We are sick. And what's important, at least to me, is the ability to communicate that we are sick and how we are sick and how we can heal ourselves collectively. This entire planet as a whole. Like, let's go. Let's bring it up. Yeah. Like, I'm not a pessimist. Like, you might be surprised because I might have the disposition of a pessimist, but I'm not a pessimist. I'm not. We got this, man. We got this. Anyway, that was episode 1, right? This is where humanity currently is in our species development, intro to stage 3. Episode 2, right, which will be the next episode. I don't know when that will be out. After this is up, I'm going to take a bit of a break, calibrate my life, because there are some things that I wanted to implement in my life. And then once that is sort of sorted out, then I'll go into putting together episode 2. Yeah, I don't know if that will be a live stream. It might not be. Considering, but I mean, I think this one kind of went away. Okay. It kind of went okay. It's fine. It's fine. All right. Episode 2. This human species is currently sabotaging itself. Intro to stage 2. We've You can see why this title is this. Um, oh, but you have no idea. And then episode 3. Socialism is the worst of our problems. Intro to stage 4. You'd be like, wait, what, girl? What? Um, I have no problem with socialism. I have a problem with the monetary token. It's a response to the existence of the monetary token. I'm not a socialist because, like I said, I don't adhere to the monetary token. I am a ludicist. And as you can see, as to how I defined what ludicism is and what a ludic being is, you could see how the monetary token does not fit into that. Um, as we were talking about video games, um, and how to elicit play, right? How those elicit play. Yeah. But we'll get into that when we talk about stage 4, which I'm really excited to talk about. Like, stage 4 to me is probably the most exciting part. For me personally, as an individual, I'm most excited about talking about stage 4. It's funny, you might be looking at this, be like, when are you going to talk about stage 1? I will, don't worry. There are 12 episodes. There are 12 episodes. You gotta uncover the mystery in a digestible way, right? In a beautiful narrative, and put a pretty little bow on it. Anyway, that was been episode 1 of the Hominid Development series. Um, I hope you're well. I hope you do amazing things, and I hope you do your best always. Until next time.